Okay, y'all. Okay. I am putting this together. All right. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to make this a video or to do a live, but I figured it would be good conversation because everything that's taking place right now with Trinidad Shambliss, conversation about Malik Willis, Deshaun Watson, s- all of it ties back to Shedeur Sanders. And one of the things we talked about after the draft last year is that this situation is not going anywhere. What happened to Shedeur in the draft is not going anywhere. And we talked about how we talked about how we use the word karma, right? We use the word karma when we talk about things coming back on the NFL or coming back, you know, following the draft. Like, in other words, it's not going anywhere. Like, this gonna come back on the NFL. And I was thinking today, because finally somebody posted on X about one of the owners in the Epstein files. They were talking about the New York Giants co-owner, Steve Tisch. And they were talking about how Steve Tisch, one of the owners, remember the owners took Shedeur Sanders off the draft board. This karma. Steve Tisch is one of the 9 owners, in addition to Peyton Manning, Geno Smith, and Casey Wasserman, who they put over the entire 2028 Olympics, but he's an agent in the NFL. All became chummy with Epstein after he was a registered pedophile. Yeah. And understand this. Who you do business with matters. Your intentions matter. And one of the things we learned about these Epstein files, in addition to the NFL's association that people are not wanting to speak about, but now it's coming out. I want y'all to pay attention. When the Epstein files first came out, I did a video online. They showed everybody with the NFL who was associated. And I kept saying, is it just me or is nobody talking about this? But it seems like since now you got the CNNs picking up the story about the Epstein files. And when are they picking up the story? After international consequences have been levied by foreign governments, right? So since foreign governments have been exiling people, firing people, holding people accountable, making their first arrest coming up this week. Now, major news in the U.S. feels safe to talk about it. Now that you have the major banks, see, they feel safe now. Why? Because the major banks, including Deutsche Bank outside the U.S., but we got the big ones, Wells Fargo and Bank of America and whoever else is considered a big bank, cutting off the credit lines to Donald Trump. They're not going to lend him any more money. And they're calling in the loans. It's time for him to start paying back the loans. Those are consequences. This is after Interpol decided they were going to do some investigations. So as you can see, the walls are closing in from the outside towards the end. And one of those walls is directly adjacent to the NFL. And today, after Interpol, after the media, after Deutsche Bank and all the big banks are holding Trump, not wanting to do business with him, now all of the ones that yap on the internet are talking about at least one owner, Steve Tisch. Now, yesterday on some of the actual hearings, they were talking about Robert Kraft. And we talked about Robert Kraft having that 2019 or whatever that year was, he got popped for solicitation of in a happy endings place. Well, they revealed that Jeffrey Epstein counseled him and helped him get representation in his defense. So again, we have NFL owners choosing A, to do business, to cohort, be friends with, and we're beyond friendship. Let's do business. With who? A registered what? A registered pedophile. A registered SA. A person who was clearly had to register for this and chose to have a property in Arizona because there was a loophole that people like that could get somewhere. So now the owners, at least two of them, have been openly discussed, but they got like 7 or 8 more people to talk about. Let's see how long it takes for those chickens to come home to roost. And what does this have to do with the NFL draft? Everything. Because who took Shedeur off the board? So you willing to do business with pedophiles, which is you shouldn't be, and people in foreign countries are being fired and exiled for it. They weren't in the files doing anything. These countries are kicking them out because here you are doing business with people that traffic and murder unalive children and eat them. I can't even think of a corporation in America that its executives or employees could get away with that. And they're not getting away with it in foreign countries, but over here, it's being protected. And so were the owners, the same owners who took Shedeur off the goddamn draft board or named in Epstein files after he was known to do what? So what did they do? Flock to him? Let's see if they have any consequences. See, this is why everything is so screwed up, right? Because running a professional franchise for sports that's supposed to be competitive is not the priority. But I will tell you what the priority is in addition to doing business with pedophiles. Discriminating against Black quarterbacks. And that's why we're here today. Here's a question I haven't heard anybody ask out loud amongst the yappers. Why on earth is the Cleveland Browns trying to acquire a third QB1? Why does the Cleveland Browns have 2 QB1s and are looking to acquire a third? Why are the Cleveland Browns stacking QB1s together when they could be playing on 3 different teams? Why are the Cleveland Browns only acquiring and stacking Black QB1s together? These are all valid questions that nobody's asking. And I heard somebody say Malik Willis is a superstar. He sure the hell is. But he was a superstar and was supposed to be like Shedeur, a first-round draft prospect. So I went back and looked at Deshaun's, Shedeur's, and Malik Willis's draft profile. First of them, all 3 of them are first-round draft prospects. Deshaun was supposed to be first overall, but they dropped him to 12th. And I want you to know that one of the reasons Deshaun asked for a trade was because they took his Travis Hunter and traded him just out the blue to disrupt their progress. Yeah, that's what they do. So Deshaun Watson was actually doing well. And it wasn't until after, if you ask him, maybe he'll say he felt betrayed, that there was some agreement that they would talk before they shake up the team majorly and trade his go-to wide receiver, that they would talk to him, but they didn't. They just led him to believe that. And then they went and did it, and they didn't give a damn what he thought. So when he asked for a trade, that's when he got popped. That's when he got singled out. Why would Deshaun Watson be singled out? You know, when I look at Deshaun Watson's draft profiles, yeah, he should have been first overall because these damn draft grades are damn near A pluses and A minuses. Malik Willis is a solid B plus. So is Shedeur. They kicked him on the athleticism, which is crazy, considering when they try to hold him in the pocket and get him sacked, he uses his legs and his rushing touchdowns go up. But I went and I didn't just look at their scores. I wanted to see, why is it Deshaun didn't get first overall? Why is it Shedeur didn't get drafted in the first round as projected, as evaluated? Why is it Malik Willis didn't get drafted first round as projected, as evaluated? And this is the trend with Black quarterbacks. But you know who did get drafted with C grades? First before Lamar? Josh Allen. Shedeur, Deshaun, and Malik Willis all had better draft grades than first round Josh Allen. There's a pattern happening here. And it seems to me that these students who are going back to school, like Trinidad Shamblers, want to go back to school, are right to want to go back to school. Now, I don't know Trinidad Shamblers personally, but it wouldn't surprise me if he wants to go back to school to try to get to the natty because he was this close. And since he was this close, I need somebody to tell me. And Dante Moore was this close, right? Dante Moore was close. Trinidad Shamblers was close. Carson Beck was close. What the hell is Arch Manning #1 for next year? See, what Trinidad Shamblers needs to do is sue the hell out the NCAA for colluding against him, aka restricting his movement, so he can't come back to school and be the story next year because they wanted to be who? Just the little rankings they put out yesterday that I shared in the community show you that they willing to cheat every damn person in college football to get this Manning kid to come out first. Why is the Manning kid above Dante Moore? How far did he go? He didn't do anything to deserve that, just like Jackson Dart didn't do anything to deserve be drafted before Shedeur. Josh Allen did nothing to be drafted before Lamar. It's just because they're white. And if you read the Epstein files, they don't like black people. They said the Epstein guy eventually gave in to letting black people come out there. So if I have owners of NFL teams who unjustly took Shedeur Sanders off the board and gave out his phone number to 2,000 people who did not need to know in an attempt to humiliate him on national broadcast television during the draft where they lure people to watch because of Shedeur, is it safe to assume that because they do business with or friends with, pal around with a known pedophile who's known to be racist, that they are as well? Does that begin to explain why Malik Willis, who was a first-round draft prospect, was drafted in the 3rd round? The same thing happened to Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart had damn near the identical QBR. Jackson Dart got moved up to the 1st round. Malik Willis got pushed down from the 2nd to the 3rd. Is there a correlation here where racism is concerned with the owners who took Shedeur off the board being implicated in the Epstein files? If they were in a foreign country, they would be exiled and or fired for doing business with and being friends with a registered trafficker of boys and girls. Let's be clear. It was not just girls. I don't know why people want to hold on to that point about it just being girls. Absolutely not. It was also very young, blind boys. These kids had a lot in common with their appearances. Some of them were from the Ukraine, which makes people now look and wonder, is that why you wanted to be involved with the Ukraine? Yeah. Is that why you want these kids in detention centers? Yeah. No investigation at Zorro Ranch. Citizens should be having drones fly over this place nonstop in rotation because nobody will do anything, right? Just like nobody in the NFL will do anything about the abuse Shedeur Sanders sustained. Do you see the pattern? Nobody will do anything about black quarterbacks being severely devalued and their pockets picked, because being a 1st round pick and being a 3rd round pick is double-digit millions different. You talking $6 million in the 3rd round versus $40 million in the 1st. And Cleveland wants to acquire Malik Willis, who's also a 1st round pick, who's also a QB1, who they're now ranting and saying he's a superstar. I'm like, and when did that happen? Because I looked at Malik Willis playing at the end of 2025 season. Quarterback Malik Willis has played 22 career regular season games. He's only had 6 starts across 4 seasons. 6. Playing for the Tennessee Titans, Green Bay Packers, he has primarily served as a backup or a spot starter, throwing for 1,300 yards and 6 touchdowns in how many years? 4. But suddenly, he's a superstar. No. See, he was a superstar, which is why he was evaluated first round. But when they got to the draft, they did what the hell they wanted to do. And it was no longer about talent. Just like when Shedeur got out there. And Shedeur played against the Panthers with 0 development from the Browns and was making surgical throws. It shows he was a first round pick, just like Malik Willis. So should we assume that in 4 years, when his rookie contract is up, they'll be saying he's a superstar and he can go to another team and block another black starting quarterback, but he can never go to a white team and take the starting job from a white quarterback? We are talking racism here. And since we have 9 NFL owners associating with Epstein, who was known to be racist, had sores on his mouth from alleged acts of cannibalism, eating children, babies, and he blamed the black guy. Said a black man tried to kiss him. You see how they just blame black people? So I said, well, why didn't Shedeur get drafted? We're going to read that too. Blame the black guy. Guess you explain things. You explain horrible things that you have done, like cannibalism, eat babies, because the black guy was the problem. You hide your racism by saying the black guys aren't good enough, or their dads are problems, or we love their athleticism, but can they pick up complex NFL defenses? It's funny how Shedeur did it with absolute 0 development. I don't think these damn defenses are complex at all. I think they hide behind these defenses as if to say, oh, well, the school you went to, Malik Willis, was Liberty, so you played simple football. You can't possibly grasp the complexities of an NFL defense. But yet here he is a superstar, and he'd only started 6 games in 4 goddamn years. And he was a first-round draft prospect until he got to the draft, and the owners, several of them implicated in the NFL, the Epstein files, the NFL files for Epstein, known to be racist. Is there a correlation there as to why these black quarterbacks are being devalued? Because these owners, not only are they morally bankrupt for palling around with a registered pedophile who is known to be racist against black people, throwing black people under the bus when they get in trouble or to prevent from being accused of something. Isn't that what happened to Coach Prime? When you look at why Shedeur wasn't drafted, it's more about Coach Prime than it is. It had nothing to do with Shedeur's talent. Absolutely nothing to do with Shedeur's talent. But Josh Allen, who had lower scores, gets drafted before Lamar, Shedeur, and Malik, and possibly Deshaun. See, here's the problem we have. Lack of accountability. But is it time for the NFL to be held accountable? Of course it is. But just like you see with the Epstein files, nary a mention until today that they finally want to talk about the Tish guy. Did they talk about Robert Kraft? Because they did in a congressional hearing. I haven't heard any of these talking heads talk about it. But they sure the hell talked about Coach Prime and blamed him for his sons being pushed down. But does that excuse fit for Malik Willis being devalued, or Jalen Milroe being devalued, or Lamar Jackson being devalued, or Deshaun Watson being devalued because he ain't their daddy? There's correlation here that people want to ignore. not just the correlation to you choosing to be friends with, pal around with, make money with a registered pedophile that's getting people locked up in foreign countries and fired. An entire ambassador in Norway had to resign because Epstein left her kids in his will $5 million each. Just based off of that. And we got people over here who want to talk about Steve Tisch finally, but don't want to say anything about Robert Kraft or anything about the Falcons owner. The Falcons owner is on the list. The Minnesota Vikings owner is on the list. So since the owners are close and they do everything together, what is the implication there? What is the implication? That they all knew about what was going on with the owners that are listed in the Epstein files? Isn't that what they're saying about Jay-Z? Is that why the NFL unfollowed only Jay-Z, who's black? Blame the black guy? You see where we're going with this? It seems that the racism is starting to come to the forefront, and karma is how we're getting there. And the reason why it's karma is because nobody wants to hold anybody accountable, including the owners that took Shedeur off the board. So here comes karma, exposing the owners for who they really are. Willingness to pal around with pedophiles who are known to be racist. We're talking registered, which means you have been to court, that you are known to have done this, but somehow it didn't matter. You weren't disgusted by it. And just like him, when you want to deflect from your wrongdoing, in his case, allegedly eating children and having mouth sores from cannibalism, he blamed the black guy, which is exactly what the NFL owners did when they said Coach Prime is the problem. Do you see the pattern? Do you see the pattern? Is this why they don't want to talk about all of the owners on the Epstein list? And how morally bankrupt is it to keep talking about football without talking about the apparent racism against black quarterbacks, including Shedeur, including Malik, including Deshaun? Was Deshaun's situation blamed the black guy? Because none of those women came forward, they got fined, which meant it was other people involved. But just like Epstein, just like the NFL owners, blamed the black guy when it came to Deshaun. Had him to settle all of these cases so they could look like they were doing something right, and then gave him every dime back plus some for him to go and live a cushy life and be quiet while they drag his name through the mud. So $230 million may have allegedly been hush money. But should we be surprised that hush money will come from owners who are on the Epstein list or who are incestuously close, not my words, but in NFL agents' words, with owners who are on the Epstein list? Are they on the Epstein list by a different name because they love the talking code? We said it last year. This ain't going nowhere. What happened to Shedeur wasn't going anywhere. I also said they don't seem to be interested in straightening up and flying right and running a professional sports league. But just like in the Epstein files, whatever it was that they said they were doing was a cover-up for something else nefarious. So since we know the Cleveland Browns are clearly not running a professional sports organization because there's a petition to either get some accountability and some changes made or to force the sale of the team because it's so unstable, mismanaged, and I'll add corrupt. Should we be surprised that the Browns organization is run like it cares less about what it's supposed to be about? It seems to be focused on something else more nefarious, such as acquiring a third QB1. Why do the Browns need a third QB1 when they were happy to keep a head coach who had only won 6 games in 2 seasons? So why do you need 3 QB1s that can get you to the Super Bowl, but you are happy to maintain a team that is failing? That's a valid question. Why are you trying to get a third QB1? We don't even talk about their names. We don't even have to talk about their race at this point. We have to talk about their skill set. Why are the Cleveland Browns trying to acquire a third starting quarterback in Malik Willis? A third, which means Deshaun, Malik, and Shedeur could all lead 3 individual teams. Why are the Browns hoarding starting quarterbacks, but was content to lose with Dillon, who they put in front of one of those starting quarterbacks? These are all questions. I'm waiting to see what y'all gonna say in the comments. These are all questions that need to be answered. So I asked, why was Shedeur Sanders, why he wasn't drafted in the first round? It said due to a combination of on-field concerns, holding the ball too long, his sack numbers, inconsistent reads against complex defenses, and off-the-field issues. So let's go back. Let's go back. So you're saying that due to a combination of on-the-field concerns, holding the ball too long, sack numbers, inconsistent reads against complex defenses. There's that complex defense, and Shedeur got out there and played against the first-team defense in the preseason and was making surgical throws and making throws no other NFL quarterback was making, and went toe-to-toe with Josh Allen without being developed by the Browns. So, or the defense is truly complex, or is that what they say, to devalue and or eliminate and or exclude a black quarterback? These questions need to be asked because there are NFL owners, the same NFL owners that took Shedeur Sanders off the board, that devalued Malik Willis, that devalued and singled out Deshaun Watson. Who have been exposed to be palling around, doing business with a registered trafficker of boys and girls, little boys and little girls. And there seems to be a cover-up in place, not just overall in the NFL. And the nefarious behavior and associations with a known child trafficker who was also known to be racist and blame black people for their own misdoings that black people had nothing to do with, begs to ask the question about what it is in the NFL they are blaming black people for that black people are not responsible for. And when I say black people, I mean quarterbacks. So what you see here, what they're saying about Shedeur is blaming Coach Prime and Shedeur. But let me read that first line to you again. Shedeur Sanders wasn't drafted in the first round due to a combination of on-field concerns, holding the ball too long, sack numbers, inconsistent reads against complex defenses. But they were going to draft him number 2 overall and pay him $40 million. So you had all this information and you were going to pay him $40 million. So is it true? Or is it just something to say? Or is it blame the black guy? just like Epstein and the owners that palled around and did business with Epstein in the NFL, and the owners that are incestuously close. These are the owners that took Shedeur off the draft board. These are the owners that devalued Malik Willis. These are the owners that devalued Deshaun Watson and singled him out. These are the same owners that bypassed, didn't need Lamar Jackson, who was an MVP. So it's documented. They colluded against Lamar in free agency. These are the same owners. These same owners that are in the Epstein files are the same owners that did everything, the aforementioned claims that I just made. They are documented. How is it that Deshaun, Lamar, Shedeur, Malik are all first-round draft evaluated? But when they get to the draft, when the owners make their decision on who they want to lead their teams, these players get devalued and pushed down in the draft. Blame the black guy. Talking about complex defenses, Shedeur proved that those defenses are not complex because he carved them up in a preseason game after having last-minute notice that he was going to play with no NFL development. Because remember, there weren't enough reps to go around because the QB room was conveniently crowded. He didn't need it. There were no reps for him. He didn't need it. That's why he was evaluated first round, like Malik Willis. And suddenly, Malik Willis is a star, just like suddenly Jameis Winston is the QB1. Suddenly, Jacoby Brissett is the QB1. It's funny how suddenly black QBs who are already QB1s, who are stacked and collected like infinity stones on NFL teams behind other black quarterbacks only, are suddenly appearing to be superstars, but they were all evaluated first round. So it shows you that the combine is a farce. It shows you that years of scouting is a farce. And it shows you that this is why people went to Canada as black quarterbacks like Warren Moon, and why a lot of these black quarterbacks went back to school, and why Trinidad Shamblers should go back to school or go to Canada. So everything that's listed here is either a lie or an excuse to justify why you were planning to pay somebody $40 million and you changed your mind. Absolutely not. Because you got him over there as a deep discount and you still decided to hold him back, to derail his career. So let's understand this. You didn't devalue him because you thought his skill set cost too much for the first round value. You devalued him so that he wouldn't have the opportunity to be a QB1 on the record and play the entire season. That's nefarious and it's criminal. It's called fixing and rigging games. It's also cheating players. It's called collusion because you're restricting his movement, and it's racial discrimination because it's only happening to all of the aforementioned black quarterbacks that I named. As I said before, this is not just happening to Shedeur. It's not just happening to Shedeur. So I'm curious to see, what do y'all think about the correlation to the owners in the Epstein files and their relationship, because all NFL owners are incestuously close, not my words, and agents. And they're palling around with a known trafficker of children, young boys and girls. And they're also known to be racist against black people, blaming black people for things that they didn't do. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? These are real conversations that need to be had. So when we read the rest of this post, which is intended to justify why a first-round draft pick who was going to be paid $40 million as of 4/4/2025, 2 weeks before the draft, suddenly finds himself at 144. Let's move on. It said, and off the field issues. It said primarily the perceived. So we're talking subjective here. Something that has nothing to do with quarterback evaluation. Perceived circus, which means it's made up. surrounding him and his father, Dion. Poor pre-draft interviews, which we determined was a lie. And the person was fired and suddenly rehired on another team. And skipping key workouts. Where's the proof that he skipped the key workout? Because what they said was he wasn't at the combine. But there were a lot of people that are in the first round that are not at the combine. It looks like the combine is a farce because all of these black quarterbacks were first round draft picks. All of them had better evaluations than Josh Allen. And somehow Josh Allen gets ahead of them. Somehow they get severely devalued and it affects their money. And we talked about that. So are we trying to, one, make sure that the transfer of wealth does not all go to black quarterbacks in the first round? So we pushing them out the first round? So we blame the black guy and hide behind an excuse to blame the black guy like Epstein did, the same Epstein that palled around with NFL owners. They want to talk about Steve Tisch. Congress wants to talk about Robert Kraft. But what about the Falcons owner who's on the list? What about it? All I'm seeing is the same thing. I'm just seeing blame the black guy. Stack them up together. Make them compete against each other, but don't give them a real opportunity. Cheating black people because you don't like black people. Cheating black quarterbacks because you don't like and don't want black quarterbacks to lead your team. And you're already guilty. Or excuse me, you already settled $1 billion lawsuit for race norming against black NFL players. People want to talk about football incessantly. And what's starting to happen is the problems, the nefarious activity, the obvious racism, racial discrimination is starting to stack up at a glass ceiling to the point where you're not going to be able to see the ceiling because there's so many problems covering it. But they want to keep talking about, oh, this, excuse me, this person got hired. This person got hired. But they aren't talking about why it is the Falcons fired Raheem Morris and hired a coach with a worse record who happens to have a black quarterback drafted in the first round, who was benched in his rookie season after he went to training camp like Shedeur and beat out the guy that somebody else. These are all real questions. People want to talk about football, but you can't talk about football and not talk about the Epstein files. You can't ignore who's in the Epstein files on the NFL side of it, and you can't ignore Epstein's behavior and the owner's behavior. You can't do that. You can't ignore that Peyton Manning is in the Epstein files, especially when we're talking about, there was a list put out yesterday. A list was put out as to who the quarterbacks are coming into college, coming out of college, right? I said ESPN puts their list out somewhere around March, April, May, etc., right? Well, somebody else put their list out yesterday, and they had the Manning kid at the top. And people are like, what on earth has this kid done to be at the top of this list? Nothing. Just like Jackson Dart didn't, and neither did Tyler Shaw. So we're headed for another draft to not be about talent, another combine to get players evaluated that are quarterbacks in the first round based on talent. But it doesn't matter when we get to the draft where the owners are. See, the owners showed us when they took Shedeur off the board, who's out here making the decisions. And the GMs are just puppets for them to hide behind. So suddenly, because they want to block a black quarterback, be it Michael Penix Jr., Shedeur Sanders, or hell, anybody else that's currently available to be a QB1, Malik Willis suddenly is a superstar. Malik Willis been a superstar. There's no justification for him being benched in Tennessee for Will Levis, who failed. And then they wanted to bench Cam Ward after him being the number 1 overall pick. They wanted to bench him for Will Levis, and Will Levis had already failed. So we have subpar, failed and mid-white quarterbacks being drafted and positioned over black quarterbacks that earned the starting gigs, which is not new because that's where Joe Gilliam, that's what happened to him. He beat out Terry Bradshaw in training camp. And they tried to destroy his life so he could be unavailable. Blame the black guy. So I think I have here on I think I have Malik Willis. So I just shared you Shedeur. So let's see if this is Deshaun or Malik Willis. Let's see. So you can see basically what's happening, right? All right, so let's see who this is. So we have Malik Willis fell out of the first round of the 2022 NFL draft primarily due to concerns about his readiness. Suddenly he's a star. He only started 6 games. It said raw passing mechanics and the need for significant development to adjust from a simple college offense. So he's being penalized because he went to Liberty. So in other words, it didn't matter who he was. It didn't matter how talented he was. He only went to Liberty. You see? Penalized because you went to Liberty, but not looking at the quarterback. This is supposed to be a quarterback evaluation. Why are they evaluating Liberty and not Malik Willis? As if he didn't have any film. So significant development. When did he get it? Because he only started 6 games. So when did he get this significant development as a spot starter? To adjust from a simple college offense to a pro level system, as if it's just so advanced. But yet Shedeur Sanders was neglected by the Browns, thrown into the fire with no advance notice against a first team Carolina defense who just went to playoffs, by the way. And he carved it up like a surgeon. You see? Using complex defenses, things that are not measurable. They need to be able to measure how complex the defense is to know exactly where to slide a quarterback. They don't have that. That's subjective. That's just something to say. How can you prove it's complex? How can you prove it's not? Well, we know it's not when you see college quarterbacks come in like CJ Stroud and put the team on his back, or Caleb Williams and put the team on his back, or Cam Ward throwing 3,100 yards, or Shedeur Sanders going toe-to-toe with the MVP, being in the same company with Aaron Rodgers, doing something no other Browns quarterbacks have done multiple times. That's how you measure it, their performance. So their performance is not being measured. They're just saying that the defense is complex and they won't be able to get it, which is a knock against their mental cognitive functioning. Josh Allen had lower scores, but they didn't have no problems with him with the defense. That wasn't their concern. He had 70s. Malik, Shedeur, Deshaun had 80s and 90s. This Jim Crow. When the black quarterbacks do better, they still get devalued, not just pushed down in the draft, which negatively affects their trajectory of their career, because you see how they use Shedeur's 5th round status. He can't do this. He couldn't pick his jersey number. Well, guess what? Will Howard is a 6th round pick, and I have never heard nobody refer to him. Oh, the 6th round pick, Will Howard, can't do this. They have nothing but glowing praise and reviews. This is racism. Somebody said earlier today, because I shared the information about the petition that the Browns put out. And they said respectfully, how is this not going to hurt Shedeur? This could impact him negatively, that there's a petition out there. I'm like, well, for one, it's about the Browns, and he plays for the Browns just like a lot of people work for the Browns. But secondly, I said, how is a petition calling for accountability going to negatively affect him more than the racial discrimination he has had to endure since he was coming out of college? The same thing happening with Trinidad Shambliss. They're making it difficult for him, trying to restrict his movement. When a player just got 9 years another year to play 9 years. Another player got 7 years. They won't even give him 6. And he was actually forced to redshirt. And it said that in the reconsideration hearing today that the NCAA is confused about whether he played 3 or 4 years. Why are you confused about that when all y'all are lawyers sitting in court? You didn't do your research? The same way they are railroading Trinidad Shambliss, they railroaded Shedeur. They didn't have to railroad Malik Willis. Why? Because he went to Liberty. So that was him being railroaded. Now imagine if he was good enough to go to a Big Ten school, but they railroaded him to Liberty. You see? That's exactly what happened to Dante Culpepper. He was good enough to go to big schools, but they pushed him down to USF and figured he would go there to die. These black quarterbacks are railroaded from high school. That's why so many black quarterbacks switch off before they even get to college, because they want a chance to make it. That's why the 5-star Ty Thompson, who was railroaded by current coach Dan Lanning, who also may have been implicated in railroading Shedeur Sanders in college and in Cleveland, railroaded Ty Sampson, who just switched off a 5-star. Imagine Julian Lewis switching off to a tight end to try to get to the NFL because they don't want to accept him as a quarterback, because they just told him to stay over there and never gave him a real opportunity, but didn't want him to leave and go somewhere else. Dante Moore was just paid $7.5 million to return to Oregon, and they have him listed number 2 behind Arch Manning. Dante Moore played in what game? Arch Manning didn't do that. But see how they propping him up, like they propped up Jackson Dart, like they propped up Tyler Shaw, like they're propping up Mendoza. What do they all have in common? They're not black. They don't even have to have the athleticism. They don't even have to have the talent. They just not have to have black skin. And this is being done by the people that control their teams, because the owners took Shedeur off the board, or the owners that are calling the shots right now that also colluded against Lamar Jackson. This is why we're seeing the discrepancy with them balling out in college, being evaluated in the Shrine Bowl, in the Senior Bowl, at the Combine, being a first-round projection based on skill and talent. And when they get to the draft, they can't read defenses. They said Shedeur couldn't read defenses. We all saw that was a lie. We knew that was a lie. And if we didn't come in with this kid, he would be done like Malik Willis, like Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson. That's why none of them asked for a trade, because they used Deshaun Watson as an example, but they also used Terrell Pryor as an example. They switched him off to a wide receiver after benching him behind an undrafted free agent, which is no different than Shedeur being benched behind Dillon. Dillon was an undrafted free agent until he went to the Manning Passing Academy. See how that name keeps coming up? It also came up in the Epstein files, and they refused to talk about it. But what they did do yesterday was put Arch Manning first. Why? Because Peyton Manning is in the Epstein files, and they're trying to get that kid over there to Cleveland, where Shedeur is. He was their plan to kill Shedeur Sanders' career, because if you notice, there's never any talk of Shedeur Sanders being traded. But there is talk of going to acquire a third black QB1 while they're rebuilding. They've already said they're rebuilding. So you're going to go get a third black QB1. You don't want to trade Shedeur. You don't want to trade Deshaun so you can get some more assets like an O-line or whatever. I don't care if you get another black quarterback, or I don't care what color they are, but you want to get a third black QB1 that was already devalued in the draft along with the other 2. So you can continue the devaluation in Cleveland. Why does it seem like Cleveland is some kind of go-to to kill these black quarterbacks' careers? That needs to be discussed and investigated, just like the Epstein files, because the NFL owners are in the Epstein files. When you were growing up, what did your parents teach you about guilty by association? You will be judged by the people, the company that you keep. All corporations are judged by who they do business with. You know why? Because executives entertain. That's why they have PSL seat licenses at all of the major stadiums to bring in clients and prospectors. So you palling around with a registered trafficker, which is why people in foreign countries are being exiled and fired and forced to resign and resigning and dropping like flies and about to be arrested. The first arrest is coming on Friday. And it's taking people on the outside to do it. And as the walls get closer and closer to the inside, now people associated with the NFL want to talk about Steve Tisch. Let me hear you talk about Robert Kraft. Why you didn't point out that both of the owners who were associated with the Super Bowl teams, both were listed in the Epstein files. Yes, I know one is deceased. That doesn't change anything. Just because he died, he was in the Epstein files before he died. And who was Patriots owner? That's why I was so lackluster. See, what people don't understand is the way you treat people comes back to either bless you or haunt you. And right now, we're seeing the haunting. The owners that took Shedeur off the board and the owners that are incestuously close to the owners that are on the Epstein files are all being haunted, all being revealed for who they really are. Just like Jeffrey Epstein said that a black man tried to kiss him, and that's why he had mouth sores from cannibalism, allegedly. It is now being revealed that they were eating human flesh. So we know he's lying. So just like on the NFL side, when you start looking at all these other black quarterbacks like Malik Willis, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, Shedeur Sanders, just to name a few, you now know the owners are lying about Shedeur. The way he carries himself before and now tells you that when they said he was entitled, which had nothing to do with quarterback evaluation, told you that's just something to say, just like they talk about these complex defenses, which is another way of race norming. It's another way of race norming. Just because we're not talking about CTE, it's another way of race norming. So I said, finally, it's about time y'all finally talk about, but they need to keep going, right? They need to keep going because it's 9 NFL owners on the list. And the fact that they refuse to talk about it should tell you that it's concerning that they don't want to talk about it, because if you could clear it, you could clear it. Am I right? If you could clear it, you would clear it. That is something you would want to clear up, right? That's something you would want to clear up. Let's see if I can find it. So when you hear all of the conversation about Malik Willis, you need to ask the question, why is it the Browns are trying to acquire a third starting quarterback? Why do the Browns need 3 starting quarterbacks when these 3 quarterbacks, or at least 2 of the 3, can be on other teams? These are valid questions, right? There are people who feel like Trinidad Shambliss should not exercise his legal options to go back to school. But they're not looking at the fact that one of the reasons several quarterbacks went back to school is so they can avoid what's happening to Shedeur and Malik Willis and Deshaun happening to them, which happened to Warren Moon being devalued. They won't talk about it. So this is the post that they put out finally about Steve Tisch and Epstein, but they're not talking about the other 9 owners. But their behavior, there's a correlation between Epstein's behavior, the owners who palled around with him. Why do you use the word pal around? Because if you're going to do business with somebody, you're going to pretty much have to kind of get to know them a little bit. And who you do business with matters. Conducting business with a known, registered, is what? A fireable offense. And now you should be investigated. And because there's a significant number of NFL owners associated or on the Epstein list, including Peyton Manning and Casey Wasserman, who they just put over the 2028 Olympics. You see how these people get elevated because of who they associated with? And who they associated with is a known, registered pedophile. But the good people get cast down. What did I say about rejection is protection? So this is the post right here that it's about time. It said Giants co-owner Steve Tisch. Let's see something. Put that away. It said Giants co-owner Steve Tisch exchanged dozens of emails with Jeffrey Epstein. It was just more than dozens of emails. You can read the emails. He was scheduling children years after Epstein had registered as he's a registered offender, right? Sex offender. It said, showing Epstein connecting Tisch, a film producer, with women and largely focusing on introductions to young women, to girls. They're not young women. They're children. You see how they still want to fix it? They're children. They're children. They're children. See how they want to still make it look good? Talking about The Athletic did a deep dive into this disturbing stories. And I said, okay, it's about time that somebody talks about this, but keep going. Because it says it right here. It says it's about time the football world discusses the 9 NFL team owners on the Epstein list, along with Peyton Manning, Geno Smith, and Casey Wasserman. Keep going. Why you just want to talk about that one? Because the players are threatening to hold out. So you're going to handle it on a case-by-case basis. This is not about accountability. This is not about accountability, is it? If it was about accountability, they will be talking about everybody on that Epstein list and everybody that talks about the NFL incessantly, whether they paid or just volunteered or voluntold, would be talking about it. But even when they put it out here, they're not young women. They're children. And it's disgusting for people to sit up here and hide the fact that these are children. And they ate these children. Some were unalive. Many were. The term they use is they made videos capturing what they call snuffing. And they made other children participate and watch. And they want to dress it up. And they only want to talk about one of the 9. Well, they need to be talking about how incestuously close they all are, which means they knew. So you either participated or you knew and you said nothing. But you want to blame the black guy. These players shouldn't even want to be associated with this league. But I'm sure they feel like the money overrides that. Okay, we'll see. When you can't get in, don't say nothing. Consider that your protection. Because guess what? If they eating children, why the hell would they eat you? They ate slaves, remember? They clearly don't think of you as human. There's a lot happening here that people should be talking about. And I'm talking about not just the Epstein files, but the correlation to the behavior in the Epstein files and the NFL owners and their behavior towards these black quarterbacks. And Epstein was known to be racist. And they have the same MO, blame the black guy. This is how you know they've been palling around. They share the same philosophy. And it explains why people who call themselves being insiders and a part of the circle are talking about anything but. because the owners also took Shedeur off the board and devalued these black quarterbacks we discussed here today. And suddenly, when they want to pit one black guy against another one, Malik Willis turns into a superstar rather than them admitting he was always a superstar. And instead of them talking about he was a first round draft pick, just like Shedeur. So if you black and you come into this league, be prepared to be blamed, something to be blamed on you, and you can only probably get paid after they cheated you in the draft if you don't get sacked excessively in CTE. When they pit you against another black quarterback, you'll get the money, but you'll never get what you came for, the opportunity to play fairly and compete, because that ain't for you. These people hate black people so much they only wanted to eat white people. They made white people hate black people so black people couldn't know what was going on, so they could eat white people. So finally, somebody wants to talk about it, but they're not being 100% transparent. They want to talk about how disturbing Tisha's story is. Why they didn't mention Robert Kraft? Congress did. Why they didn't mention the other owners on there? Why they didn't mention Peyton Manning? Is this why all of a sudden the Manning kid is first on the list so they can get their marketing together, so they don't let Peyton Manning being on the Epstein list affect what the Browns want to do with the Manning kid, because they were supposed to get him at 26. Now they got to wait to 27. And with Peyton Manning on the Epstein files, oh, what about all of the people, the dominoes that they got stacked up in Cleveland? All of this was being done with Shedeur coming out of college, which meant they defrauded him out of $40 million. So they need to run him his damn money. And you see the links they're going through to keep it going and keep it hush, hush. Much like the overall trafficking and torture itself. They ducking accountability. So any petition out there by Browns fans seeking accountability helps every player that plays for the Browns. And for the ones that's been racially discriminated against, I don't know how asking for accountability could negatively impact them any more than the racial discrimination has. So let me see what y'all are saying about this. It said, welcome, 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 everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Together we stand, divided we fall. Hey, Miss Pamela, how you doing? I mean, that's just straight facts. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a pleasant day. Yup. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yes, this is an informative podcast. You know, people want to talk about the feel-good stories, but the reality is there is a glaring correlation to the behavior of the NFL owners who are incestuously close, including those that are listed in the Epstein files, and Epstein himself and his racism towards Black people, including blaming Black people for why he has apparent sores that are related to, allegedly, cannibalism. And barring Black people from visiting the island until he gave in because we became useful to blame. And Shedeur and Coach Prime being blamed for Shedeur being devalued when actually they were committing fraud. And what they did to Shedeur, they did to other Black quarterbacks. And now that is coming out because the Browns are exposing themselves once again by wanting to acquire a third Black starting quarterback. Every quarterback that they have and want to acquire were all first-round draft picks, were all devalued, and are all being pitted against each other to save space and time to acquire the Manning kid, while over in college, they are rigging the entire season so they can continue in the NFL with their plan to get the Manning kid and ride his back into some type of popularity that they don't want Shedeur Sanders to bring. Nothing will work out until this is resolved. Because Here we are again, weeks away from the combine, and we're talking about Shedeur Sanders and now the other Black quarterbacks who were also first-round draft picks that they blamed for their own being devalued after they all were evaluated as first-round picks. This needs to be investigated. The Athletic wants to investigate something, then investigate all of the goddamn owners and investigate the racism against these Black quarterbacks and the correlation to the behavior that Epstein had that they chose to pal around with. You want to do something? Do something that's right. Instead of writing fluff pieces, instead of trying to get accountability, because you have New York Giants players who are like, I'm not coming back there if he's still there. But what about the others? You want to keep that hush hush. Yes, the NFL is trying to go global at a time where global society has actually taken the lead on the consequences. I have said it before, that shit is not going to work out. I have said it many times. The global community is different. As you can see, they have taken the lead. While over here, no one has been arrested. The man's homes haven't even been seized, but they were quickly sold off. This should have been done immediately the first time. But airspace over El Paso, which is close to that place, was closed for like 10 days. Who does that? Everything to protect. The same thing we're seeing in the NFL. Oh, we'll throw you a bone. Okay. People have figured out this man is not deceased. And it's common sense. When you look at how hard they're trying to protect her, who he didn't even really leave anything to in his will, they protected him. Just like these people on the internet and the commissioner are protecting the owners. It's going to all come to a head, though. Because like Ramon said, they trying to go global. And they not playing over there. China has come out and said, if anybody is caught involved with this, it's life. In the way that they determine. That's what it should be over here. But people want to make excuses and self-investigate. That's ridiculous. Big bank, take little bank. That's it. That's what it's going to be. Yeah, it's disgusting. Everything starts with the owners. That's what it is. It's that Gabriel Rico Jimenez said in a video that came up about these people, including Epstein, eating children. And these folks thought that she was, I saw that lady. And here's the thing. People have known about this. Just like people know about Black quarterbacks being devalued and discriminated against by the same owners that are incestuously close, with some being listed in the Epstein files, and people knowing about that behavior. There is a bridge. The MO, the modus operandi, is the same. And the roots is racism. Now, I don't know why they eat children. I have no idea. Apparently, this is not new behavior either. But Black people are made to look like savages. Native Americans were made to look like savages. But I can assure you, anybody eating children and humans are savages. Everybody else got blamed. Pamela said it's because there are so many aging white quarterbacks that the NFL would rather have the replacements be the same. Therefore, they're stacking all the young Black quarterbacks away somewhere. That's what it's given. That's what it's given, and it needs to be looked into, right? So as we approach another draft, right? As we get to another draft, and we saw several of the players want to go back to school, what we're seeing is some type of corroboration between, apparently, it's starting to look like the NCAA and the NFL, because how do you explain that before we get to Trinidad Shambliss, what's happening to him being railroaded, Shedeur Sanders being railroaded? How do you explain Shedeur Sanders being derailed and held back off the Heisman stage with Dylan Gabriel, and the same thing happening, derailed and held back by Dylan Gabriel in the NFL? It's like they're trying to tell you they're working together. And then coming into this year's draft with so many players going back to school, including Dante Moore. How is Dante Moore, who just ran for a bid for the Natty, how is it that he is second to the Manning kid who has earned nothing? What it's exposing is what happened to Shedeur in the draft. Shedeur is Dante Moore. Dante Moore behind the Manning kid, Shedeur and Jalen Milroe were pushed down behind Jackson Dart and Tyler Shaw. Tyler Shaw was the 8th ranked quarterback. So here's what it seems to be. The combine is a farce. Scouting is a farce. That's where you get your first round grade when you're black. But it's when you get to the draft where the owners make their decisions, and they're making race-based decisions. They claim they didn't like DEI, but they have turned the draft into a whites-only club for quarterbacks at the top, because they, I guess, sick and tired since the racial initiative, social justice, take in racism out the end zone. I guess they sick and tired of that. So they sick and tired of drafting 2 or 3 black quarterbacks in the first round. So they made a pivot, a hard reversal by pushing down Shedeur and Milroe. But this was already happening. But they televised it. And it stood out. It stood out because there were people who knew, people who follow the NFL, who knew that in 2024, Jacoby Brissett was the 15th black starting quarterback, which meant when you drafted 3 more in the first round, because that was the trend, because of the athleticism, the talent, it was about talent. That's what happened. They were like, oh, these 3. And they knew who the 3 were at some point. When Shedeur hit October 2024, and he was number 1 coming out of college, he was number 16. But the story, the lie, blame the black guy, didn't fit with Cam because they don't know his daddy. But it was perfect for Shedeur because they knew Coach Prime. If you notice, when they lied and said somebody gave out Shedeur Sanders' phone number, who did they say? It was the Falcons. You know why they chose the Falcons? Because Coach Prime is associated with the Falcons, so they try to make it seem personal. It was the New York Giants, but they covered for them too. What else do they cover? The fact that the Browns want to acquire a 3rd starting quarterback should be very concerning. And everybody in the media should be asking, why are you only acquiring starting quarterbacks? And why did they prop up Dylan, who was an undrafted free agent, to a 3rd round? Whereas Malik Willis was a 1st round and got pushed to the 3rd. Or Shedeur was a 1st round and got pushed to the 5th. So notice, non-black gets propped up while black gets devalued. I mean, I'm thankful that they didn't like black people. And it wasn't just the island. It was all of the properties. And apparently abroad, which is why several people are being arrested abroad. See how they want to limit it to just the one? Oh, it's not that bad. Oh, young women, they were girls and boys. And they're pictures. And they still try to cover up. Why are people trying so hard to cover up something they apparently, allegedly, didn't have shit to do with? What do you get out of it covering it up? Why would you do something like that? Because maybe you are involved. Maybe you are implicated. I don't think it's a coincidence that the owners that took Shedeur off the board have been exposed as palling around with a registered trafficker who's racist, who blamed the black guy, who didn't want the black people around until they changed their minds and found a way for the black people to be useful. Same thing. Draft to destroy. We don't really want you, but hey, we can't just let you go off elsewhere. We got to find a use for you. Likes and clicks. In Shedeur's case. Hey, Blind Beauty, how you doing? It said, remember who the coach of GM was for the Texans, Bill O'Brien, who traded and trashed Deshaun, DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver. Yeah, I think he did get trashed when he got out of there. I think so. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? I kind of recall that a little bit. It said Malik Willis played at Liberty University, drafted by the Titans, and devalued for Will Levis. Right. And they were going to actually draft, or they did. They drafted Cam Ward. See, they draft people based on, can I control you or not, if you black. I think they thought they could control Travis. I think for some reason they could control Cam Ward. And they looked at Jalen Milroe. They looked at Cam Ward. They looked at Shedeur. Understand this. They handled Jalen Milroe in college the same way they are handling Trinidad Shambliss. Derailing. Different tactics, same process. Shedeur Sanders was derailed. It looks like these entities are working together to derail these black quarterbacks. And now they're being exposed for who they really are. That's what the Epstein files and the association with the 9 owners being on the NFL list. And it's also starting to give the impression that they are somehow aware that Peyton Manning is on the Epstein list. Of course, they know, and that could have a negative impact on things. So they are trying to usher up the Manning kid with marketing, as if talent once again will not matter in 2026. That's the part that people are not paying attention to. That is happening again. It wasn't just Shedeur. It was Shedeur and it was Jalen Milroe. This is the list that came out yesterday. Let me share this with y'all so y'all can see what they're working on. And it's funny. I just said, oh, it's probably not going to come out until we get to, I think it's May when ESPN puts their list out. This year's draft haven't even happened yet. So they're talking about the top QBs and we don't even know who got drafted yet. You see what I'm saying? So how is it you putting this out so super early? Is it a coincidence that Peyton Manning is in Epstein files and they want this kid to go where Shedeur is? Because this kid was always going to block Shedeur, which means they always were going to devalue him and hold him over there for ransom. You think it's coincidence they never talk about trading Deshaun and Shedeur? They can trade both of them. But instead, they want to hire a third black QB, a starter, not just a black quarterback, a bona fide starter. And now they're selling him as a superstar, as if he wasn't a superstar when he was drafted. He only started 6 games. I don't doubt he's a superstar. Shedeur's a superstar. So is Deshaun. That's why I said this is not going anywhere. So right here, this came out yesterday. Top QBs in entering the 2026 season. This doesn't typically come out until May. But they put this out super early. And they got the Manning kid ahead of Dante Moore. I don't recall Texas going nowhere. Did Texas even make the playoffs this year? No, I think they were ranked number 13. And that was after a questionable game versus Oklahoma, where the Oklahoma quarterback had a broken thumb or something crazy. I was like, yeah, I knew that game was rigged. So this tells you that they already devaluing Dante Moore, but I guess he's supposed to be okay with it because they paid him $7.5 million. Why on earth do they have Darian Mensah down here at number 8? When you look at when Shedeur and Cam and Milroe were on this list in March or May of the year that they played their last season, they were also number 8 and number 9. 8 seems to be the standard place for black quarterbacks. But they put Dante Moore at 2. Why? Oregon. That's why. Because why is Darian Mensah down here at number 8? Did he just get $10 million to go to Miami? And what has the Manning kid done ahead of either of them? And anybody else on this list black? So they're going to have an all-white class, huh? So the 2 black quarterbacks that are on here, maybe somebody else is and I don't know, are behind a kid that didn't perform to be ranked number 1. So that tells you Dante Moore is probably the best quarterback. And I'm willing to believe Darian Benson is number 2. How did Sam Levitt get to number 3? You see? It's already rigged. This is what I mean by maybe Trinidad Shamblin needs to investigate or have some lawyers investigate if the NCAA is working with college football to derail these quarterbacks, because it happened to Milroe, it's happening to Trinidad Shamblin, it happened to Shedeur. And now it's happening again to Darian Mensah and to Dante Moore. Both of them are proven. Arch Manning is not. Neither was Jackson Dart and Tyler Shaw. They just white. So again, this is where people need to be investigating and talking. This is where the same behavior exhibited by Epstein, who the owners, who are essentially close, 9 of them have been revealed to be palling around, doing business with. When you do business with known registered traffickers, pedophiles, you normally have some kind of consequence to pay. You get exiled from the community. Because why are you doing business with pedophiles? Why are you palling around with somebody that was known to abuse children? That's not a good look. And blame Black people and be racist against Black people. So you doing everything they do. And since all y'all incestuously close, all y'all in on it, just like all of them was in on it, taking Shedeur off the board. Devaluing Black quarterbacks. Slam dunk case. So there's no reason the Manning kids should be number 1, and nobody has questioned it. Nobody has questioned it. Hey, everybody, late lunch today. Hey, Sharon. Thank you, Blind Beauty. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's global. That's what people are saying, that it's global, that a lot of people knew. They're talking about this could destroy the stock market. People are like, nobody care about that. We're talking about abusing children here. Oh, we're not just talking about abusing children. We are talking, that's why they calling the people that are still alive survivors, because there's so many that were unalive, right? And none of this was investigated in out the country. Things are happening, but over here, the cover up still exists. And even though they're talking about it, nobody has been arrested. You have 3 million documents, 3.5 million documents. You have thousands of videos that you say you can't show because they have children in there, and you didn't arrest nobody. And then the people associated on the NFL side, they ain't even talking about Robert Kraft today. I guess they scared. So they protected Robert Kraft. They protected the 9 NFL owners, Peyton Manning, that are on the list, including Casey Wasserman, that they put over the 2028 Super Bowl. And one of the people they talked about, and it's funny how all of this is connected to Ohio State University. And their athletes have civil lawsuits for abuse, but they don't want to talk about it in NFL. How do we know these players weren't abused? How do we know that? How do we know that these players weren't coerced and intimidated into things? Because we see intimidation. We see coercion. We see the racism. We see the hatred. So how do we know? With the way Stefanski was gushing over Carson Schwarzenegger, he even had to catch himself on camera. People were like, is he okay? Now people are talking about his unhealthy attachment to Dylan Gabriel. That's a valid point. They are young. They were associated with Abercrombie and Fitch. Lex Wexner is associated with Abercrombie and Fitch. Abercrombie and Fitch's CEO is wearing an ankle monitor who should be in jail somewhere. For what? Trafficking young men. And they sponsored the Pro Bowl. They had all of these athletes standing right in front of the sign. And maybe, just maybe, Joe Burrow knew something because he covered it up. He stood in front of the sign so you couldn't read it. But the rest of them clearly didn't know. They're all young men. You have people their age in college, going back to college. The same college, Ohio State, where their athletes were allowed, that sued to say they were allowed to be abused. And people want to sit up and not talk about this because there's something there. They want to talk about who was hired and who was fired. I want to talk about Zachary Orr and how he got fired from the Baltimore Ravens. But I said that was going to happen after he, for whatever reason, had his defense to go easy on Dylan and went crazy on Shedeur. We said that was going to happen. But that's not more important than palling around these owners who mistreated Shedeur, who allowed Shedeur to be abused. And none of them stopped it. This is the same thing with the Epstein files, and they are in the Epstein files. And the ones that aren't, they're all incestuously close. So we're talking about abuse happening, whether it's mental or physical. How do we know it isn't further than that? It's not a coincidence that of all the NFL players listed on the list, 2 of them are quarterbacks and 1 of them black and 1 of them white. Who was on there first? And how did the other one get on there? Was he taken somewhere? Was he coerced? You know, people want to sit up and not talk about this. I want you to understand something. People test you to see how far they can go with you before they all hold you down and do something against you. That's what happens. Then that's maybe what could have happened to Geno Smith. I don't know how the hell he got on that list, but he the only black one on there. And they want to unfollow Jay-Z and only Jay-Z. They didn't even unfollow Steve Tisch. They won't talk about Robert Kraft and the other people, including Peyton Manning. But they put out this tawdry post about Geno Smith. Blame the black guy. So I asked, how the hell did he get on there? Who invited him somewhere? And people have pointed out, some of them aren't in the videos, but they are being held accountable for doing business with and palling around with a registered offender trafficker and about to be murderer, because what is happening here? These people's silence tells you, 1, there's a cover-up. 2, they don't want to be accountable. And 3, they don't want to talk about it. Why? Are they going to try to get another black quarterback on that list so they can throw him under the bus like they did Jay-Z, or in front of the bus? The fact that they only unfollowed Jay-Z when it's 9 owners plus Peyton Manning on that list should tell y'all a lot. Blame the black guy. The Texans and Browns are rubbing elbows. They all are. Watkins, Hopkins, all remains of Bill O'Brien when he was the coach and GM of the Texans. It said, mix me with the fake evaluation. Yeah, all of it. It said now Mendoza is saying he's skipping the combine. Right. And they talking about Shedeur skip key workouts, which is the combine. Of course he's skipping the combine. Because this is the era of, what is it? The check down key. And all the check down, none of the check down keys are black, just like none of the head coaches. Yep. Kids today, you got to know your worth. You got to know your worth. Yeah, you got to ask the questions, and they don't want to ask. That's why on the person's page, I said it's about time in the football world talk about the Epstein list, which y'all want us to know. I mean, even Congress is talking about it, but you won't talk about it. But you unfollow Jay-Z. Blame the black guy. That's why I said there's a correlation here. And the more they're silent and ducking accountability, there's a story there. Because if you could clean it up, you would. That means you've done some things you have absolutely no business, even if it is palling around with, doing business with. You had no business because you would say it. And all you want to say is that we unfollowed Jay-Z. Not Steve Tisch, not Robert Kraft. And you dropped them Epstein files, which were late, the week of the Super Bowl, and you used Shedeur to cover. And you announced that the Browns are going to play this game in Europe, that they were going to play next year against the Saints. while you had everybody's attention about Shedeur and away from the fact that the Epstein files had just dropped, and you used the Super Bowl for that too. But like I said, Monday came and people moved right on. Then they tried to use another distraction, and the Epstein files still there. And people gonna want to talk about the season, and the Epstein files and the owners in it is gonna still be there. This is not going anywhere because it's criminal. And if you could clean it up, you would have cleaned it up. So instead, you're trying to put this kid at the top of the list because Peyton Manning, who you wanted to be the holy grail behind the scenes in Cleveland and already lining up the dominoes for that to happen, is on the Epstein file list. That's the only reason why this goddamn list is out this damn early, because the combine hasn't even happened yet. This don't come out this early. This is to put it in your brain that this kid is good. Who the hell are you trying to convince? Because all these kids gonna go to the combine and get evaluated, and you're gonna do what the hell you want to do when you get to the draft, because that's the pattern. That's why I'm glad so many of them went back to school. And I hate that Trinidad couldn't go back to school, but they've been trying to kill the Ole Miss program since Lane Kiffin left, and he still got a job. He shouldn't have no job either, because he out here associating with a known what? Somebody listed in Epstein files more than anybody else 1,000,000 damn times. So why he got a job over young boys? You see? That's why they don't want to talk about it. They just want to shove it down your throat. Disgusting. CP confronted that guy about Shedeur and the lies about his son. That guy said 12 is a great kid and admitted the slander. CP said, you didn't say my son was a good kid when the lies were going around. And shout out to Coach Prime for calling him out. That's why did y'all notice what's going on today? Did y'all notice that they attacking Coach Prime? They say it's the alumni. What did I tell y'all? Didn't I tell you they was trying to get rid of him? See, that's why you don't hear me talking about it. Colorado. I dropped the collection. It don't say Colorado. It say Bolorado. Because that's what I called it when our guys were there. And that's what Coach Prime, it actually turned it into. But see, now that he called those people out, just like Shedeur mentioned $40 million, now they want to pay Malik Willis $40 million. Suddenly he turned into a superstar that he already was. They picked his pockets too. But they want to pit him against Shedeur. And I told y'all that's what they're doing with Brennan Marion. I told you that's his replacement. Now you got these alumni people coming out trashing Coach Prime because he called out. Why are you worried about who Coach Prime calling out in the NFL? You ain't college. You associated with college, right? You an alumni of the Buffs, right? I tell you what, go find him $44 million and give it to him. See, they don't want to pay him either. See how they want to cheat the black coaches, and we don't want to pay you your buyout. But how much they gave LSU coach when they bought him out? $50 million? But they don't want to give Coach Prime his $40 million. When he signed that contract, they knew he was never going to get that money. I'm just waiting on somebody to start their own something. I'm just saying, I don't know what we're waiting on. It's past time. That glass ceiling is covered up. There's so much going on up there. Instead, I wonder that certain teams asked him to skip the combine like they did Shedeur. That some of the media used it against Shedeur talking crazy, like he didn't want to throw. Fact, Sharon, that was the Shrine Bowl. Several players asked Shedeur not to participate in the Shrine Bowl, but it was a known fact that the top players don't participate in a combine because what? You've already determined that this is your first round pick. I told you they already know who was who. They already know who they're going to get. How do you already know they're going to get the Manning kid? It's funny how they don't want to say it out loud. But you okay with trying to pit, what's his name? Malik Willis against Shedeur. And let me tell you what they said. Oh, Malik Willis can be like Justin Fields. I'm like, y'all sure like Justin Fields now that he decided he want to go back to his abuser and Chicago and be a running back. Suddenly you like him that he don't want to be a quarterback. See, when you black and you want to be a quarterback, woo, the hate is real. The racism is real. The shit you have to endure. Being lied on, your pops being lied on, get sacked excessively, being injured so they don't have to pay you, but an insurance company does. Michael Penix Jr., Deshaun Watson, Pat Mahomes. It's just what it is. That's just what it is. And it's a shame that, people aren't talking about it. And honestly, I don't know if it's a gender thing. I don't know if it's a race thing. But somebody said to me earlier, they were talking about how racist the Browns organization was. And they believe that one of the reasons they don't want to say that Shedeur Sanders fans or Browns fans is because they don't want accountability from Black people. What y'all think about that? Makes sense to me. So to keep from being held accountable by Black people, they're excluding Shedeur Sanders fan base. What y'all think about that? It's that all of the remaining Black quarterbacks will be steep discounts in the draft. Absolutely. And that's what I mean by Trinidad Chambliss is being railroaded while he's still in college. Because I think it came out yesterday, they said the NFL did not invite him to the combine. Understand that. That was yesterday. Why was his trial consideration hearing today? And they denied him again. So he's been denied 2 or 3 times. So just yesterday, the NFL didn't invite him to the combine. But today was his hearing. This is the same thing with Kyron Lacy. Kyron Lacy was derailed. So what does that mean? That means if he can't go back to school and play football, he has to come out. He can't go to the combine. He probably not going to be in the draft. He going to be a steep discount. This kid going back to school would have been a problem for this situation right here. You see how they put this out when this kid was still appealing? This is why you don't put it out this early. Trinidad Chambliss will be the story next year, but it absolutely has to be this kid right here. None of these kids have earned this. It's early. And y'all want me to believe that they don't know who they're going to draft? Of course they know who they're going to draft. The Browns know who they're going to draft next year. If Watson is healthy, he's QB1. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. If so, he better watch it because insurance company might pick up his salary again. Might pick up his salary again. Browns want Shedeur to be QB1. So no, they don't. Coach, I don't know why you sitting up telling that lie. The Browns do not want Shedeur Sanders to be QB1. The last time we talked about this conversation, Coach, do you understand that they are trying to acquire a third QB1? You see what I'm saying? So people saying, oh, Deshaun gonna play. Okay, y'all gonna see what they're gonna do. Why would I want to get a third QB1 if Shedeur is the guy? I wouldn't hear talking about paying Malik Willis $40 million, the same $40 million Shedeur used in his example. Does that make sense? Unless you're gonna trade Shedeur, and people just gonna rejoice at that, right? That's not a bad thing. You haven't heard Shedeur in any trade scenarios, and they might know they're gonna trade it. They already talking about who it is they're gonna cut, or some people actually believe they just holding him hostage like they are Deshaun. Deshaun can be traded. Somebody put it perfectly in the comments. They're gonna hold Deshaun and Shedeur to their contracts end, and nobody's gonna want them, just like nobody wanted Lamar in free agency. You know how many times that has already happened to Black quarterbacks? Vince Young is always going to be an example. Seem like they only like Justin Fields because he don't want to be a quarterback no more. He want to go to free agency as a running back because he know he can't be a quarterback. He know they don't respect him, but rather than go do his own thing, he decides to, I don't know what the term is. I don't want to use cower. He just showing us he don't know his worth. Somebody need to help that kid. Can they trade Shedeur? Of course they can. Of course they can. They also could have drafted him number 2 when they weren't colluding. Of course they can. But what we were talking about on this podcast is what's going on with the owners that are in the Epstein files are the same owners that took Shedeur off the board. So of course they can. And all the owners are incestuously close, so they all guilty. So of course they can. Of course they can. So it really doesn't matter who QB1 is. I think what we're pointing out here is that the Browns are seemingly trying to just acquire and hoard Black starting QB talent to keep them away from starting positions on other teams. That's the point. That's the point of the conversation. That's what should be happening. This is the conversation that should be actually had when everybody's talking about Malik Willis. Why Malik Willis? And why only Malik Willis? Because he went number 2? Why? Why not Malik Willis to Minnesota? Because they need a quarterback. Why not Malik Willis to any goddamn team that got a white quarterback on it? Why are the Browns even considering another starting quarterback? The Browns are committing fraud. That's what the Browns are doing. They're committing fraud by saying they're lying. Lying is fraud. Under the false pretenses of Deshaun is healthy. So how can Deshaun be QB1? If Deshaun can be QB1, he can be traded. Shedeur Sanders is the QB1. All 3 of them are QB1s. Why are the Browns trying to acquire a third starting quarterback when they could be playing on another team such as the Minnesota Vikings? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. What does it say? What's the message? What's the message that you get from the fact that the Browns are keen on Malik Willis, because documented, acquiring him for 2 years and paying him $40 million? What does it say to you that the Browns want to acquire a third starting quarterback, regardless of race, but a third starting quarterback? And then we'll get to the race part. What does it say? It shows incompetence. It shows you have no idea what the hell it is you're doing. It shows what are you? It makes you ask, why? What are you doing? Are you not good at building winning teams that you got to have? Does it even make sense to have 3 starting quarterbacks? No, there are only 32 teams. Now, when you consider that they're Black, and you know the history of the Browns recently, that they were content with losing with a coach only winning games in 6 games in 2 years. What are they doing when they only want to acquire Black starting quarterbacks and they don't strategize to win? What is the message? That they're destroying and derailing these Black quarterbacks that can start on 3 different teams' careers, that they're holding them hostage so they careers can die. Do you not understand how illegal that is? How fraudulent that is? And the fact that nobody's talking about it tells you it's a cover-up. The parallels between the Epstein files and the way they operate in the NFL and their racist attitudes towards Black people, in particular NFL Black quarterbacks, and how they hold people hostage to destroy them. And they only see Black people as useful to be blamed for their nefarious, to cover their nefarious behavior. Why eat those children? Why take them at all? Why draft Black quarterbacks if you're only going to destroy them? Those 2 questions are relative. What is the purpose? What is the purpose? So they can't go where? So they don't exist? So they aren't successful? What is the purpose of capturing people and holding them hostage only to destroy them? This is the modus operandi, the MO of the NFL with Black quarterbacks and Epstein and all of the people associated. People call them elites. You know how much of a mind play that is to keep calling these people elites when they're really pedophiles? So that's the conversation. Let me know if y'all hear anybody talking about why it is the Browns want to acquire another starting quarterback, and why are they trying to hold hostage 3 black starting quarterbacks at a time when they said they are rebuilding. So that's a multi-part question. And I'm gonna get out of here and be back later tonight at 10:35. Hopefully we can start with Rakia Jackson. She did decide to testify against James Pierce Jr. And we'll probably start with that tonight. And then we'll get back into Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns, because something has to give. Something has to give. Because the situation is there for everybody to see, just like the Epstein files, but nobody will do anything about it. And I mean, holding these black starting quarterbacks hostage and derailing their careers, destroying them. We need to talk about it. All right. I'll see y'all later tonight at 10:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank y'all so much for the huddle, and I'll see y'all tonight. Thank you, everybody.